my background is as a musician. So that's partly a composer sort of writing pieces for performers, often from a classical background or from increasingly more and more from other sort of backgrounds as well. So not necessarily using traditional notation, but all kinds of text scores, occasionally graphic type things, but more and more, and especially in terms of the Bank Street projects, a kind of devised way of working. So a bit more like sort of theatre practice. So kind of working with a few sort of musicians in a particular space and seeing what we come up with. Yeah, I think I'd found that recently, well, in the last few years, that I'd been moving more and more towards very singular, quite abstract pieces, and I wanted to open my ideas up to a sort of more messy situation, a more collaborative situation. And so I kind of devised this idea of going on walks and then trying to turn those walks into performances. So initially I took 5 expeditions from history, of each of them for expeditions taken for very different reasons, and each of them would take us in a very different direction across Sheffield, because in each case I take the shape of the original journey and impose it on the map of Sheffield. So I managed to find ones which would take us sort of north, east, south, west, essentially. The walks themselves, I encouraged people to come along with me and document them however they wanted. So some people would make sound recordings, others would take photographs or film or write sort of verse response of some kind. And I'd give readings along the way of little bits of the journals of the original journey. And they were quite sort of social occasions, the walks in a way. The idea was to kind of find collaborators, to kind of involve people more, to get people sort of participating. I'm very interested in those kind of artistic situations where it's not just an artist and audience thing, but it's more of an interaction, really. I tend to work with a kind of wide variety of sound materials, so that can be sort of everything from conventional musical instruments to kind of more rare stuff that I've stumbled across, like sort of in charity shops, kind of like a Chinese violin or something like that, or various kind of odd whistles and horns and so forth. And it can also involve everything from sort of just everyday found objects which make interesting sounds, like a kind of old metal desk, which one of the expeditions was based upon the Ming Dynasty treasure fleet journeys, and I found this old metal desk which reminded me of one of the boats, so I kind of used that as a sounding object, with water pouring into it, various kind of soundings against the actual object itself. That was quite a messy performance, but things like that, really. So things which kind of are suggestive of things that I've encountered on the walk, or things sometimes which have related to the original journey story, really. Walking's always been a kind of way of clearing my mind so that I can sort of get towards the ideas I'm working on, really. So it's a way of kind of clearing thought processes, and that's connecting that with my other sort of writing things down has been quite an important thing to me, to make some sort of connection between writing and walking. It's kind of finding spaces like this where you're kind of slightly off the beaten track, you're slightly off the main stream of the road, so you just have that hint of what's going on beyond. But it's also quite a sort of personal space in a way, because the sound is much more intimate. So I think what I'm most interested in is the kind of change between one and the other, really. So the kind of opening out that you get when you walk out into the main road there, and the closing off when you come in here, and sort of everything becomes much more up close in terms of sound and so forth. It's also a case of I'm interested in some of the actual acoustic effects of the reflection of sounds in here. So I don't know, for example, if you kind of clap your hands here, you kind of get a slight slap back on things, whereas out further, when it gets more open, it becomes much more variable. I mean, it's partly eaten up by all the sounds that are going on in the rows and so forth, but occasionally you kind of get an even bigger reverberation in that sort of space, really. Yeah. And I think it's also in this kind of space, when you have these old buildings, there's a kind of sense of mystery when you don't know the history of the place, really. And it's the combination of the kind of brand new sort of office space fitting in around these kind of old buildings, which are used for so many different things, really. I don't know, I suppose in a way I could kind of play this going down there just to kind of give you a sense of the changing sort of sounds. That's another thing, sort of thinking about this space and these particular buildings in terms of the walks that I've been doing. Lots of the time there'll be sound recordings of the spaces themselves, and there'll be I'll be sort of thinking about the various events that happen within that time, such as the rolling of the wheels going past of the car, or the people with their suitcases going down there, and that might be a cue for a certain event, or it might be actually that we wouldn't use the sound recording at all, but would in some way recreate that sound using the resources that we have to hand, and relating that in a way to the visual elements, like this particular building here, the various sort of angles that there are in the building, the various kind of surface qualities of the building as well might suggest kinds of material to be working with, sort of very tactile, maybe even sort of materials like brick, for example, but also sort of using string instruments, wind instruments and so forth, using their more kind of grainier aspects to kind of reflect some of the impressions that we've had on the way on those journeys, really. So that might kind of be sort of cueing points for the actual recreation of the walk in the performance. I would say that it tends towards the more abstract side of things, what I do, especially in terms of these performances based upon the walks. There will be some sort of line that I'm following, which in some sense follows the line of the journey, but I don't lay it out in an explanatory way, really, for the listener. It's very much kind of thoughts and sensations impressions that I've had, which kind of build the piece, really. So there's no sense in which it's exactly program music as such. There's no way you can hear, that's the sound of the mountain call or something like that. It's much more kind of based upon impressions and relating those to sounds that we can make, really. Like, for instance, one of them, Journeys, is based upon Alexander von Humboldt's Journeys to South America, and it kind of describes howler monkeys in there. So I had some recordings of howler monkeys. One of my friends, Nathan, who was involved in this, one of his instruments of choice was a drum with a piece of sellotape, which he extended across the gallery, and was performing the sellotape. And it kind of, there was a definite match between the howler monkeys and the sellotape on there, so it's quite a nice duet which emerged from that, really. So it's kind of finding those sort of, it's about correspondence as much as kind of literal representation, I'd say, really. So yeah, it tends towards the abstracts, but it is based upon things which we've found or encountered in some way.